President Biden is set to give his first State of the Union address tonight. It comes at perhaps the most perilous moment of the president's term yet. A person familiar with the text of the speech told the Washington Post, while the address has obviously been significantly revised in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Biden's White House advisors have long hoped the speech would constitute a, quote, reset of his administration. According to polling conducted by ABC and The Post, in the days leading up to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Biden's approval rating dipped to 37%, a new low for the president.
The same polling showed that a whopping 75% of Americans rate the economy negatively. That's up from 70% in November. That represents the worst rating since 2013 in post-ABC polls. Tonight, Biden is expected to launch a new four-part plan to combat rising prices and inflation. Our rising panel joins us now to weigh in. Julia Manchester is a political reporter for The Hill. Philip Wegman is a White House reporter for Real Clear Politics. Welcome to you both.
Thank you. Good morning.
And so, Philip, let me ask you first about the culture war question that will be kind of visible to everybody there. You know, in the past, there were questions about masking and social distancing inside the event. And you're going to see those again. They've now said that masks are optional in the Capitol. And so do you think you're going to end up seeing the Democratic side all masked up and the Republican side not masked up and becoming a representation of our two parties? Or do you expect something a little bit more mixed?
I think it'll be a little bit more mixed. I mean, we're going into year 3 of pandemic politics, and politicians certainly know how to milk every moment to signal to their side that they are being responsible when it comes to the pandemic. Obviously, though, this is not just an empty gesture because of the context and the symbolism here. Any parent who has kids in schools can tell you that masking is a big deal, and they're going to be watching to see if Nancy Pelosi, the House Speaker, for instance, whether or not she still wears a mask or if she follows CDC guidance, which says that masks are no longer necessary. It feels a little bit like Groundhog Day, but I think that this could potentially be, a pivot for the pandemic, or it could be more of the same.
So, Julia, talk to us a little bit about what you expect to hear from the president. Obviously, Russia is now the Ukraine situation just is totally commanding the narrative, our attention. But there's a lot else going on that was going on before this crisis, and hopefully will be going on after this crisis, because hopefully this crisis will resolve soon. With the economy so on people's minds, and Biden's numbers just in terrible shape, what should he focus on in order to get people feeling more favorably to halt this really precipitous decline in his approval?
Well, Robbie, I think all of these things in a way are connected. At the center of this, you have inflation. This has been an issue that has been plaguing Americans really over the past year or so due to, in part, the coronavirus pandemic. Conservatives would argue that a lot of this has been caused also by the government pumping more money into the economy. So that the coronavirus pandemic is connected to inflation that way. And then, of course, you have the crisis and the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and that could also end up impacting inflation, as well as rising gas prices here in the United States. And I think this is where all of those issues in a way come home to Americans. Foreign policy issues tend to have trouble really penetrating the American domestic psyche. I think this is something that Americans don't necessarily think about every day. And talking to experts and sources, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has definitely penetrated that, and it is something that Americans are talking about a lot more, not only because the news media is really leading with this crisis, but also because it has the potential to impact energy prices and the economy in the U.S. So I think those are the 3 major topics you're going to hear from Joe Biden: Ukraine, inflation, and the coronavirus pandemic. What are the next steps with that pandemic? The mask mandate is lifting here in Washington, D.C. today. It'll be interesting to see if Joe Biden predicts there is a light at the end of the tunnel closer than we might think.
And Julia, let me ask you about the Democratic controversy that's broken out about responses to the State of the Union. So as far as I know, at least 3 of them are going to be given. Colin Allred is going to kind of give a Democratic centrist response. Josh Gottheimer is going to give a response kind of representing the right wing of the Democratic Party. He's going to do it along with a swing state Republican, Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania. And then Rashida Tlaib is going to give a response representing the progressive wing of the party. The Democratic centrist and right-wing class, joined by the political media class, is in an uproar that Rashida Tlaib is going to be delivering a response, with Gottheimer saying that she's going to be keying your own car. Why is it inappropriate for Rashida Tlaib to give a response, but it's entirely appropriate for Gottheimer to join with a Republican to give one, and Colin Allred to give a centrist response, particularly given the fact that Gottheimer spent the last year actively undermining the Build Back Better agenda?
I'm not sure why it's more inappropriate. I think it makes perfect sense if there's going to be a progressive response to have a major progressive voice to be leading that response. And Rashida Tlaib is obviously a major progressive voice in the progressive movement here in the United States. That being said, though, look, Democrats are at real risk of losing their majority in the House. And we have, obviously the Republican Party in the House and the Republican Party in general is not perfect. There are definitely divisions. But if I'm a Democrat right now and there's all this internal squabbling over something as trivial as giving a response to the State of the Union from the leader of the Democratic Party, who happens to be the President of the United States, especially in a time when Democrats probably need to be united to at least pass another major piece of legislation before this critical midterm election, I don't think that looks so good for Democrats. And I think it makes it easy for Republicans to capitalize on this, because as far as I know, it's only Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds who's giving the Republican response. There doesn't seem to be as much squabbling on that side of the aisle.
Yeah, Phil, what do you think about the Republican situation right now? Obviously, it's quite strong and quite favorable. As long as they don't, really screw up right now, they're gonna clean up come November. We just had CPAC, where I think it was confirmed, if there was any doubt, that Donald Trump is still by far the leading Republican figure. He gave some indication, perhaps, that he is going to run again, as we sort of suspect that he will. Marjorie Taylor Greene kind of embarrassed herself a little bit. That was maybe the only sort of significant, more than a little bit, but a little bit in terms of the splash it makes on the sort of national conversation. What do you think Republicans are going to be saying in response to the State of Union, and how are they kind of thinking about guiding the ship toward this sort of easy victory if they don't screw things up too badly? Of course, they always could. Trump could always at any moment say something really embarrassing or really bad for the party, but they don't seem to care too much about that or be guarding against that in any way.
Well, I've been focusing a lot more on what the president is going to say in his State of the Union tonight and the White House strategy around this big speech than Republicans. And the reason why is, frankly, because we can kind of already expect what Republicans are going to say, what they are going to hammer on the coronavirus. They are going to say that the science hasn't changed, but the politics have. And that's why the masking is changing in D.C., and that's why the CDC guidance is going to be changing throughout the country. So obviously, they're going to complain about the coronavirus. When it comes to the economy, they're going to say, there have been some jobs added. There's been some growth, but we're talking about 40-year high inflation at this point. And then they're going to zero in on something that the White House is not going to focus on tonight. They're going to talk about illegal immigration from the southern border, because that is an issue that might not have a lot of residents in D.C. at the moment, but certainly that is one that plays well for the Republican base. So, Governor Reynolds, I don't think that she is going to break new ground here. I think what is likely is that we're going to see more of the same from Republicans that we have for the last year or so now, but hammering those themes, saying that, the economy has not rebounded the way that it ought, that the coronavirus is still, a problem, and Democrats are just playing politics. And then finally, I think that Reynolds might say she might explore the fact that Joe Biden promised throughout his entire career that he was the guy who could stand up to Vladimir Putin. That was a promise he made in Congress, on the campaign, and then as president. And she might zero in on the fact that up until a very little while ago, the White House was saying that their sanctions were going to serve as a deterrent. Surprise, surprise, they didn't deter Putin from invading Ukraine. And so, yeah, I think that just like there is a lot of ground for the president to cover, there's a lot of fodder for Republicans who want to take shots at his record.
Yeah. Julia, Phil, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll have more Rising right after this.